The weather gods were on the government's side on Thursday as wild winds blew away planned union rallies around the country and robbed the mega strike of some of its impact. Still, the workers had their say.
We're out here striking because the offers that have been given to us by the government just don't cover even the bare minimum.
Our staff are overworked, they're exhausted, they're working double shifts.
Simeon, I've already told you that I am embarrassed and ashamed to be a nurse.
Kia ora, ko Craig McCulloch aho, and te puro tōrangapu mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. The numbers were tipped to top 100,000, the largest industrial action in decades, a nationwide strike.
The workers united will never be defeated! The workers united will never be defeated!
Among the protesters were teachers.
They've been saying that get round the table, have a conversation, but a conversation goes two ways. And I think they need to be reminded of that.
Doctors.
We do have to get the message through to a government that really doesn't want to listen.
Nurses.
We're understaffed, we're tired. We see patients every day who are being affected by the short staffing and all the services which are not being affected, apparently.
Firefighters.
We are the people that literally are putting our lives on the line to help New Zealanders. We'd like some support from our employers.
And more. Dentists, healthcare workers, prison staff, all walking off the job to make a point and to make some noise.
Fight back! Fight back! Fight back!
Events stretched the country from Kaitaia down to Invercargill, the largest turnout being in Auckland. The list would be longer if not for the strong winds and rain which stymied rallies in Wellington, Wairarapa and much of the South Island. But the meteorological setback did not deter the unions, still determined to disrupt. Most schools were closed and non-emergency medical procedures delayed.
I'm here representing my husband because he has to work in the hospital on life-saving measures as a union member. He's supporting the strike by keeping people alive in the hospital. So we as a family, my daughter is here, she's off school today, we're here to speak on behalf of my husband and other hard-working doctors who want more staff in hospitals.
Each workforce has their own demands, lost a little in the coordinated action, but the headlines are better pay and working conditions and safer staffing.
The teachers are sad and they're feeling stressed. It's no wonder they are depressed. They got to stay home and look after their health. They're not doing this job for the wealth.
The emotion comes at a fractious time in industrial relations, after more than 20 other work stoppages this year and months of building tension. The unions and government are in a game of chicken, a protracted standoff with neither side looking like backing down. The rhetoric ramped up last week as the Health Minister Simeon Brown addressed the Senior Doctors Conference with the Take No Prisoners message, which drew gasps from the audience.
When a union chooses strike action that forces thousands of operations and appointments to be cancelled, in my view, it crosses an ethical line. Doctors take on a professional duty to safeguard patient welfare.
And he doubled down the next day on Morning Report when speaking to Corin Dan. In fact, going further with a veiled threat.
Ultimately, the harm that causes to patients already waiting too long for the care that they need, people waiting in pain.
If you feel that way, and that's a fair enough argument, you've made your argument that it's unethical, then why not change the law as it is for other people like police officers, where there are a lot of restrictions because of the risks to safety?
Well, that may well have to be considered.
It captures the flavour of the government's response to the strikes, combative, uncompromising. The Public Service Minister, Judith Collins, issued a missive on Sunday, a so-called open letter to the public, labelling the union action unfair and unwarranted.
Clearly this is organised, clearly this is coordinated, and clearly it's coordinated and organised to cause the most disruption to the most New Zealanders. And I don't think anybody needs to be a genius to work that through.
Most attention focused on one key section of the letter, an eyebrow-raising allegation which Judith Collins claimed proved the union's priorities were all wrong. She said the Secondary Teachers Union, the PPTA, was to have a meeting with the Education Minister last month, and that the number one item on the union's agenda was not resolving the impasse, but Palestine.
Not the terms and conditions, not student achievement, nothing else like that. It's all about Palestine. And if that's not politically motivated to the Education Minister, then I don't know what is.
Except not all was as it seemed. The PPTA was quick to claim a misrepresentation of events. Its president, Chris Abercrombie, said the only reason the union had suggested Palestine as a talking point was because the minister had refused to discuss bargaining. He said, in fact, the Beehive had explicitly requested topics not related to negotiations.
It's really disappointing, this letter. It doesn't help the situation, doesn't move it forward. They didn't want to talk about terms and conditions. They said they wanted to get agenda items that weren't related to active bargaining. And we had 4 items. Palestine was one of them. We also had NCA changes, AI marking and curriculum. I really hope the minister has just misunderstood the situation and not trying to deliberately mislead the public.
But that new context did not stop the Prime Minister from bringing it up again in his Monday morning media round.
What's Palestine got to do with any conversation as a union member? What the hell's a union talking about Palestine?
No. The issue is that they say they weren't allowed to talk about the strikes, and it was presented as if somehow they were more interested in Palestine than the strikes. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Well, the negotiations are between the employer, in this case the Public Service Commissioner, and the union, so that's for them to work out terms and conditions. But, we would expect to discuss things like attendance and academic achievement and new curriculums and those sorts of things, not Palestine.
Christopher Luxon returned to the point repeatedly throughout the week, backed by both his Ministers of Education and Health, in arguing the unions were acting in bad faith.
I think it's deeply politically motivated. I honestly do. I think, I appreciate the unions are very close with Labor. I get it. They don't like our government. I get it. But actually they're not serving their members well, and I don't think they're actually serving the kids, the patients and the parents of New Zealand well.
They're all operating their strikes on exactly the same day, trying to maximise disruption.
My message to parents is that you should expect better. We're prepared to be at the bargaining table. Unfortunately, the unions aren't.
It appeared the government had given up on trying to avert the strike action and was now solely focused on shaping the public's view of it. For their part, the unions were also digging in and pushing back. And there were plenty of them. Here's the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists and its executive, Sarah Dalton.
I'm really sorry if people will miss out or have delays to their care on Thursday, but that happens every single day and the government say nothing about that and refuse to address it.
Here's the Public Service Association, headed by Fleur Fitzsimons, a former Labour Party candidate.
The minister's inflamed the dispute and the government has only itself to blame for the strikes, because they have failed to listen properly to the concerns of health workers about safe staffing, about keeping themselves and patients safe and delivering good care. If the minister really wants to help, they should empower the employers to come to the table with a decent offer so that the disputes can be settled.
And overarching them all, the Council of Trade Unions, represented by Richard Wagstaff.
Strikes are meant to make an impact. There's no point in taking a strike if nobody notices. So these unions have independently decided they want to make some impact and get the public to understand. They are standing up for the public sector. The government laments, the disruption to services. We all do. But in fact, those disruptions are dwarfed by the daily disruptions of understaffing and under-resourcing.
A key sticking point is that question of pay, whether the increase being offered is in line with inflation at 3% or not, and whether that's a reasonable request or not. The government says times are tough and the offers are generous.
We would love New Zealand to be wealthier so we could afford more and better public services and pay our public servants more. But the reality is we are in very difficult, straitened times, thanks to Labor.
We've continuously been putting offers on the table to try and find a way through.
We have gone to bargaining in good faith. We've put good offers on the table. They've not been presented to members.
But the unions don't buy it. They say the offers are not backdated, meaning that proposed pay rises are smaller than they appear.
Really, the average adjustment is around 1.3%, and that's for years.
When you annualise that offer, it is less than 2% per annum. That is not an acceptable offer to our members.
I don't think that's an unfair position, that workers in this country should not be poorer than they were previously. I don't feel that's a radical position.
The opposition parties have also swung in to defend the unions, perhaps not helping the claims of political motivation. The Greens even wrote back an open letter of their own, accusing the government of conducting a sad smear campaign, a clownish, desperate propaganda exercise. Its MP, Francisco Hernandez, said it was the government that was operating in bad faith.
I would characterize it as a toddler having a little tantrum. They need to stop clowning around with all this partisan stuff and actually be real leaders, settle the strikes by paying the strikers what they're worth, and actually investing in a public service so they can have safe working conditions. That's what the strikes are about.
Labor and its leader, Chris Hipkins, have taken a slightly more measured approach. The party obviously offered support to the unions, the clue being in its name. But it didn't insert itself into the argument, except when asked by media.
When the government attack the unions in the way they are now, they're actually attacking the people on the coalface doing the work. They're attacking doctors, nurses, teachers, firefighters. People who go out to work every day on behalf of the New Zealand public are now being besmirched by this government because they are not willing to accept a pay rise that's below the rate of inflation, i.e. it's a pay cut.
The Labour MP Camilla Bellich has raised concerns too about adverts being pushed out online by the Public Service Commission to make the government's case against the unions.
I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think any amount of public funds should be spent in a political attack on someone who is on organisations that are undertaking good faith bargaining. And I'm absolutely shocked that that decision was taken. Absolutely unbelievable decision by the government to weaponise the Public Service Commission against striking workers.
It is an unusual situation to have the Public Service Commissioner himself directly involved in the bargaining, in this case with the education unions. That has not been the case for nearly 3 decades, with the role typically delegated to the ministry. In this case, Sir Brian Roche has taken charge, raising the stakes. He was holidaying in Australia on the actual day of the mega strike, but called in to Morning Report to lay out his position.
We have done our best to break the inevitable sort of actions, but we have failed in that, and I have some regret at that, but I've got a very clear conscience that we have always been available to negotiate and bargain, but you need 2 parties to do that, and there's been an absence of a counterparty. That's on their conscience.
What are the key sticking points here? Is it simply the unions argue you're not offering them the rate of inflation, that the multi-year deals, that they don't add up to what the current inflation rate is and that they feel they're going backwards, or is it other aspects?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I know the headline number is something that they're still struggling with. I would suggest that actually it's very difficult always to keep pace with inflation. It's sort of ironic if that's how we peg everything. When inflation goes down, do you end up paying some of it back? It is one of the measures. It's not the only measure, but we're going to have to continue to find a way through this where they get fair reward and the New Zealand taxpayer gets good value.
So what are you saying, that it's not realistic for the unions to be asking for a pay increase that matches the rate of inflation?
I think these things are all judged over time and not at a point in time, and that's sort of why we need to bargain, because if I had a clearer understanding about what the absolute non-negotiables were, then I'd be better able to answer your question. We thought we were getting close with the PPTA. We put in a huge amount of effort. We addressed all of the concerns they raised with us, and then we put a document to them which they rejected out of hand and basically weaponised it against us.
You have faced criticism now for the Public Service Association running these adverts highlighting some of the offers that have been made. Is that appropriate given your position as the advocate of a neutral public service?
I remain a very neutral public servant. People will have opinions on that. I'm happy to stand on my record. I have a very clear conscience about how we've conducted ourselves and how I have conducted myself.
So what was the rationale, what was the reasoning for the adverts then?
The adverts were to make sure that the public were fully informed, whether we like it or not. A lot of people don't get their news anymore through programs like this and or the newspaper. I wanted to make sure that our voice and the voice of all the people who'd been doing the work was actually heard.
Just looking at the big picture, when you've got a government this week that has also been accusing the unions of being politically motivated, to have an environment where you've got sniping like this, does it help in getting a deal?
I think, as I said earlier, this was always going to be difficult. From my perspective, I would remain committed, as does my team, to finding a way through this. And we have to shut some of the noise out and the various incentives in front of us and get an outcome that we can all live with. And that's what we'll be doing.
And so now the talks resume. It's hard to see a break in the stalemate anytime soon, but the winds can shift quickly, as can public sentiment. A poll by Talbot Mills, also Labour's pollster, was released this week, showing 65% in favour of the strike action and just 25% against. But it was a smaller than usual survey, and so has a higher than usual margin of error. These past few weeks have been a deliberate pitch to punters, an appeal for support, and the outcome will be critical to which side ultimately wins out. Both sides seem to think they have the public backing right now, or at least a good chance of winning them over.
It is really tough when you're working full-time and you've got a lot of pressures and things like that to try and find someone to watch your kids.
Teachers are very important to our society, so I support them.
I'm very supportive of the doctors and nurses because they are doing their very, very best.
What other options do they have?
My daughter's in year 12 and she has just had interruption after interruption to her education, and there is more interruption coming on top of teacher-only days, and she just can't afford to have her future impacted like this.
Now it is a test of endurance. The unions have threatened further action, with the PPTA already penciling in 2 more strikes before the end of the year. But fatigue will be setting in across the board, and Christmas is fast approaching. No one wants to still be stuck here heading into the new year. That was Focus on Politics. I'm Craig McCulloch. Thanks for joining me. Matua.